Hey, everybody, welcome to Church Coffee, Christianity, Conservatism, Culture. I'm a co-host, Walter.
I'm your other co-host, Rob, and today we have Kelly Leary. She's the FAAST coordinator, uh, or she's the coordinator at FAAST, excuse me. FAAST stands for Faith Alliance Against Slavery and Trafficking. And today we'll be talking about this it's hard subject, but a subject that's important to, of course, Christians, but an important and hard topic that's becoming a little bit more well-known thanks to a movie released this summer. But we just wanted to talk to Kelly and get a little bit more on the ground knowledge of this. Kelly, thank you for coming on Church Coffee.
Thank you for having me.
So, real easy, our lowball easy intro question: do you drink coffee, and if so, how do you take it?
I do. I used to be a complicated coffee drinker, but
All
now
right.
I have found really good coffee and I just drink it black.
All right. What's this really good coffee that you found?
I drink Valhalla Java by Death Wish.
Yes, that sounds awesome.
So
Death
you
Wish
like
coffee.
you like your coffee on steroids?
I do, and I hand grind it every day, and yeah.
Wait, okay. So hand grind, like you are you're turning the crank to grind it.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that you're putting me to shame.
I
I'm gonna
use
go
a French press. Yeah.
nice. Can I ask you a French press question?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. What is your French press process? Do you let it steep for like 3 minutes, then press it? Are you like, yeah, 3 minutes and press, 4 minutes and press, and then you still let it sit for a minute? Like, what's your process?
So I let it sit for 4 minutes, sometimes longer if I'm doing something else, and then I press it. And
Okay.
then, yeah, I drink it, usually like waiting 30 seconds or a minute because it's so hot. But
Right. I
yeah,
I found I found I tried it once before. Is It was a 4 minutes, then you press it, and then you let it rest for another 3 minutes. And again, I'm not the big well, I love good coffee, especially island coffee in Dallas, Texas. Um, anyways, I felt like it did bring out a different flavor profile, or it opened the beans up a little bit more. So, okay. Anyway, that's me getting excited about coffee. Uh,
that's cool.
so Death Wish. I will. Hopefully, they deliver to Dallas, and I
They're
will.
on Amazon, so they should.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
We're going to take a quick break and have a word from a sponsor. Shenandoah Coffee Roasters has been a staple of Charlottesville since 1993. They offer over 25 varieties of specialty, boutique, and gourmet coffee using only the finest Arabia coffee from all over the world. Coffee is their passion, and they painstakingly search out the best coffee available. Nothing is taken for granted as they continually strive to provide the best coffee they possibly can. They roast all their coffees to order based on the needs of their espresso bar, ensuring that only the freshest and highest quality coffee leaves their roasting house. Grab a cup at any of their 3 locations: Main Restaurant Preston, On the Corner, or on Ivy Road. Or order a bag online at shenandoahjoe.com.
All right. I went to their website, so let me find my questions again. I do apologize. Okay, so Kelly, what is your story, and how did you come to get involved with FAST?
Getting into human trafficking. We were living overseas, and I was getting my master's, and I had one of my assignments for one of the classes was about human trafficking. And the teacher said, if you write your final paper on human trafficking, you can be published in a book. And I said, well, that's an easy way to get published. I'm going to do that.
Nice.
And so I did that and started to get really interested in the topic and doing that research. But I kind of, life happened. We moved back to the States, had to, and then we moved back overseas to a different location. My husband's a civilian with the Department of Defense, so we tend to move in and out of the country a lot because we like doing that. Well, when we were coming back to the States after the second, well, yeah, it was the second move, we knew my husband was going to have another assignment overseas that I couldn't go with him. So it meant that I needed something to do that would allow his job would have him get time off every 3 months for 3 weeks. And so I needed a job that would allow me to disappear for 3 weeks at a time, and no paying job would do that.
Right, man.
And as well as, honestly, if I got a paying job at that time, it would bump us up a tax bracket and we would just lose all the money we were making. And so, again, didn't want to do that. And my husband actually suggested, why not check out World Relief and the anti-human trafficking program? They have volunteers. And so I said, okay, yeah, I like doing that work. Let me do it. And interviewed. I felt kind of bad because I felt like I was taking a college intern's job at the time, college student's job for interning in the summer. But they hired me on as a volunteer / intern. And
Nice.
what so FAAST is also based out of World Relief because they're one of our members. And so I didn't realize when I applied that I would also be working with FAAST. And that's actually who I ended up spending most of my time volunteering with. And it was supposed to be a year-long gig. And as we were coming up to the end of the year, we were working on this really huge event. And I said, well, why don't I just stay on through the event? That was in late January. We don't want new interns coming in and not know what's going on. And
Right.
perfect, stay on. Then by the time the event happened, it looked like my husband and I were going to go back overseas again. And I said, well, would it be cool if I just stay on until we move? And they said, yes, please stay on until you move. We love this idea. And then we moved back over to Europe. And as we were getting closer, people were like, hey, you can do what you're doing overseas because it's all computer based. Why don't you just continue doing it while you're overseas? I said, that's a great idea. And so I just continued on with it. And when the old coordinator left, they hired me on as the new coordinator because I had been with them for so long by that point.
Yeah, man, that's awesome how that yeah, how all that or what am I trying to say? Orchestrated or came together, and God bless telework and whatnot. So how has working at FAAST impacted your faith?
A lot, actually. There was a point in time, and I didn't realize it until someone else actually asked me this question last year, that I realized I was just kind of going through the motions. I was honestly having a crisis of faith because of many, many different things. But I had one of the things we decided to produce was an Advent guide. And I write the Advent guide. And in having to do that, it reignited like my love for Advent and for Christmas, and just kind of reawakened me. And it's had me looking at Bible verses in a completely different way and trying to get a new understanding of it. And yeah, my approach to the Bible has, and trying to truly understand his love for all people and how I reflect that love for all people has definitely changed and grown since I've started this job.
Wow, thanks. That's pretty personal. Thank you for being open about that.
Yeah.
And in general, what's FAAST's history? How did it start? What's its like main goals? Its kind of driven focus.
So FAAST began in back in the early 2000s, shortly after the original Trafficking Victims Protection Act came into being. When like the Salvation Army World Service Office, World Hope International, World Relief, and Project Rescue started focusing on this issue, and they were meeting together about how they best can, address this issue. Well, they had projects at and in the United States and how they can do it, and they ended up coming up with this curriculum. Well, from that they started collaborating, and through that collaboration, FAAST was born. And so, in doing that, they created a curriculum called Hands That Heal, which is a for aftercare workers. It's in the international setting, but anyone can use it, on how to provide holistic trauma-informed care for survivors of human trafficking. And through that collaboration, it created new ways for them to collaborate and work together. And that's what we do. And we continue to provide materials and awareness materials for congregations and communities, and for them to use to help educate and raise awareness about human trafficking.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious, do y'all do a lot of work or have movement in the Dallas-Fort Worth area? That's just where I'm from.
Yeah. So FAAST, like I said, we're an alliance of organizations.
Yep.
So I am the only employee of FAAST itself. However, our members do have locations. So the Salvation Army, obviously has offices in Dallas, and I believe World Relief has an office in Dallas. Now, they might not do human trafficking specific work at those locations.
Right.
And you'll hear me say this a lot, because this is like my key mantra. Every time you fight a vulnerability, you are fighting human trafficking. And I'll get into that a little bit more later on.
Yeah.
But
okay. Yeah. So let me jump to this one. What are some myths about human trafficking, that people can either overblow or that people get, completely wrong?
Yeah, there's so many. Like when I read this question and I was like writing it out, I would start and like I just kept adding, and I have to stop at some point.
Yeah.
So first, people have this concept that it's just sex trafficking, or that sex trafficking is the primary form of human trafficking. But labor trafficking is huge, and while it's hard to know numbers about any of it because it's so hidden, experts pretty much overall agree that labor trafficking is actually a bigger situation than sex trafficking.
Yeah. Yeah. I real quick, Kelly, I feel like I kind of see that, and I don't know if labor trafficking means you're not getting paid or you're getting paid less than. And be curious if you could define labor trafficking. But I feel like working in construction, I feel like I see labor trafficking where I'm like, oh, this is like,
Yeah, label that. I mean, construction, restaurants, nail salons, massage parlors, even like, the people begging on the street. But it's basically when you're forced to work for little or less pay, and then what you should be. I mean, there's forced fraud and coercion elements to it. So either you're forced to do it, whether they keep your passport or IDs, or they're threatening you that they're going to deport you. Or they could be fraud of lying to you, about how it happens, or causing you to do it again.
right.
Those elements to it. But it's any time that one of those elements exist and you're at a job and sex is not involved. Now, that being said, a person who is in label trafficking can also be a victim of sex trafficking as well. So that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know kind of another forum, and within that kind of work related trafficking would be specifically for like the World Cup. There was a lot of workers coming from India and Pakistan into Qatar, and their passports getting taken, and basically saying you can maybe get the money at the end of the job, but you can't return home until you finish the job. Do you see that type of trafficking more prevalent in the underdeveloped and developing world than in the so-called developed world, or is this kind of just all flat, and we in America and in Canada and France, Germany, Britain, Australia just all kind of like, oh well, that like only the worst of the worst happens here, but it's not very bad. Like how is there a strata of that type of work slavery, or is it more concentrated in the underdeveloped and developing countries?
That was actually my next myth I was going to do. No, those no strata, all types exist here and overseas. People like to think, oh, it's just an overseas problem. It doesn't happen in my town, which I've actually had people tell me, and it's not true. It happens everywhere. The Polaris Project has a map of the United States that you can look at to see, well, trafficking cases have been reported. And that's just where they'll report it at, not, actually happening at it. And so you can see how prevalent it is in the United States. And it is labor, it is sex, it doesn't, of all kinds. There's no difference in the US to overseas of what kind is happening.
That is very sad, but also
it is
somewhat not surprising.
Yeah, it is really, really sad. But along those lines, another myth that we have people deal with, especially, and this is really, really true in my discussions with people in the church, is it won't happen to my kids.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
We live in a good town, we go to a good school, we're a part of the church, we're a good family, and it's not true. It could happen to any kid. Yes, those vulnerabilities that will make people more susceptible to it. But I can speak from my own personal experience. I will say, first and foremost, I was never a victim of human trafficking.
Okay.
However, I look back on my teenage years. I was raised in a Christian household. I have very, very loving parents. Good school. I didn't have really any friends, but I was depressed. I was suicidal. I lived in a really small town and I wanted to get away. And I was very close to running away from home. And I had an entire plan to leave my home in Washington State and drive down to LA. And looking back on it now, I know I would have ran out of gas money somewhere around Southern Oregon, and that this all could have easily happened to me.
Yeah.
And so we like to put the blame on things.
Yeah. I think, I have 4 daughters, and it makes me be like, okay, what kind of dad do I need to be? How do I need to be encouraging to them or empowering them to know that home is always safe?
Yeah.
And Grant, don't get me wrong, I am by no means am I a perfect dad. But thinking about that, it's like, okay, what can I do to mitigate those,
Yeah, so those great resources. I don't know how old your kids are. We have a Bible study called Change Agents. It's a 7-lesson Bible study that teaches teens, so ages 8 to 13, about God's love for all people, his love for justice, as well as what is human trafficking, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking, as well as activities to involve the family and an action kit so they can, teach their community and friends about what human trafficking is. So
Okay.
highly recommend that to teach your kids about this issue, but other organizations as well have, great resources on how to
Yeah.
talk to kids about this issue.
What's
Yeah.
the
I
age
just,
range for that? Like my oldest is a daughter, and she just turned 5.
Yeah.
And she could not finish The Little Mermaid because Ursula was too scary. So
Yeah.
whereas I know
So-
other 5-year-olds who apparently find the full live action, very new version of Stephen King's It funny. So, kids are on a range
Yes.
of their viewability. My daughter, pretty low. She gets scared of some Shaun the Sheep episodes.
Yeah. Well, I get it. So we say it's from 8 to 13.
8 to
But
13.
again, like you said, it's a range. Kids are different. So if you felt like your kid is younger, there's a great website called NetSmarts, which is great for at least, and that covers all ages of kids, of teaching your kids internet safety, of how to be safe online.
Yeah, that's good. What man, where here we go. What are some signs someone might be trafficked, either formerly or current?
So people used to say, oh, look, especially for sex trafficking victims, inappropriate rail, child, like dirty out where they shouldn't be. But I've heard too many victims recently listening to those stories, or too many survivors say, I interacted with people and they had no clue. I would go into the bank, I would go into the doctor, I would see you in the post office, and no one had any clue. I just looked like everybody else. So, sex trafficking, it might be a little bit easier to see, but you just never know, because you don't know if it's a family member trafficking them in their own home, or, it's just oftentimes at hotel rooms. So there's just no good answer to what do they look like. You might be able to see a scenario and go, oh, that doesn't look right. And if you see that, I would suggest calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline. But yeah, there's no good look to them. It's getting to know a person, looking for the vulnerabilities like I talked about before, and some of those like poverty, lack of education, homelessness, food scarcity, identity, LGBTQ plus identifying individuals or usually get kicked out of their homes and then forced into it. Racism, people, self-esteem issue, mental health issues, sexual abuse. I could go on and on. But yeah, anytime, like, it's looking for those vulnerabilities and getting to know them.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Your organization is about building alliances. How do you build such alliances, and in what way does FAAST facilitate these unique alliances over the years?
Yeah, so like I said, FAAST started out as organizations coming together, working on solving this problem. And the only way you can fight human trafficking is with partnering with other organizations. That is what we're all about. So we have paid members of FAAST that come together, and we do learning calls where we learn from people in our organization, but we have people outside the organization that we invite in as well to talk to our members to understand different aspects of human trafficking that we might not necessarily think through. We also, like our Hands That Heal curriculum, that was written by like over 40 individuals, the original, and we're looking at revising and updating it, and we're expanding even more who we're including in writing that, and who we can include in the material. So yeah, it's just using the people. It's all about networking, and yeah, just reaching out and working with various organizations.
Great. Are there any federal or even international laws that you see that need improvement, or are just need better enforcement? Like, asked another way, what are like financial and legal obligations that you regularly face, and are those just not enforced, or do we need a more overhaul of the international system, or even at least the federal system in the United States?
So yes, federal laws and international laws need better wording, better writing, depending on what country you're in. It just changes from country to country and the understanding of this issue. And that's what some of our partners or members do, is actually go out and train law enforcement officials about the issue to help them understand it better, because various places don't understand human trafficking in the same way. And so, because there's cultural issues involved. And so it's trying to explain to them why this is bad and wrong, and how we need to write laws that are better. But there are so many laws out there. And yes, they need to be better enforced, but it's also, if you look at US laws regarding human trafficking, there are some great laws out there. It's just when it comes to prosecution of those laws, it's easier to go for a different law than human trafficking. And, trying to get the victim to testify against their trafficker can be there's so many issues with it. And so regarding protection of the victim, reliving their trauma, so there needs to be, adjustments, to help protect the victim and everything. But there needs to be changes to the laws to better improve them. And there's some laws that are movement out there, but there's also, there are good laws in place that just need to actually be enforced.
Yeah. So where does investment against human trafficking need to grow?
Like financial, or like?
Yeah, I think we can look at financial and also just even, I guess, human capital.
Okay. So, there's so many different organizations fighting this and doing good work about it. It's just finding an organization that you support the work they're doing, and understand that there's more than just those organizations that do aftercare and work directly with the victims. Like FAAST, we don't work directly with the victims, but we do good work in raising awareness. And we can't stop human trafficking if people don't know about it. Like, that's the change agents. We can't stop it if the kids don't know about it and they get, sucked into it. So to realize
can I ask a question? How might that need to change, or what do you think needs to be done even at a 5th or 6th grade level, like in order to start talking about it? Because they'll talk about don't bully, there'll be anti-bullying campaigns, but should we have anti-human trafficking campaigns potentially in our later grades in elementary, junior high, high school?
Again, I'm not I can't say for sure. Like each school is different. I do know that we have a member in, it's actually a university because the Point Loma Nazarene University has actually has created a educational program to take into schools. I'm not sure what ages it goes through, but like I said before, you can have these talks with your kids, just having it at age appropriate level. So you change the language a
Right,
little.
right.
You don't go into the horrible details of what's going on, but you can say, hey, we need to pay people what they're worth. You know, we don't
For
have
sure.
sex with people like, who we don't buy sex from people.
Right.
How do you, and kind of almost side follow up from that? Do you see the rise of user created content like OnlyFans as overall I'd struggle to say benefit, but do you think that could lessen the need for women to go into more one-on-one, kind of like on the street in the alleyway sex work, or is it just this is a kind of a gateway drug, so to speak?
So, OnlyFans has been used as a sex trafficking ground. You cannot be sure that the people on there are on there of their own free will. So it's just like you said, it's kind of a gateway. One, because they're all sex trafficking victims that are on there, but two, and I've read from like stories of survivors who started out on OnlyFans, and it's like you said, that ended up going into actual prostitution because it wasn't enough, like for whatever reason. So it's not a help at all.
Yeah. um I would hope that at some point we can find an easy way for it to self-regulate its way out of the economy, kind of like what bills in my state in Utah. There's a bill in Walter State in Texas that have more or less, on a practical notion, more or less banned the largest pornography
Yeah.
websites in our state, and more are coming very rapidly because what does it say about your product when it's like, oh well, we would rather not offer it in your state than have age verification? I think
Yeah.
it speaks
Right.
pretty
Yeah.
loud for what its product generally is.
Yes.
Kind of rolling into our next question. I've heard that any city that hosts a big sporting event like the Super Bowl or the World Cup, or I'd imagine the Olympics, but I haven't really heard that as much, but certainly Super Bowl, World Cup, and NCAA basketball championship immediately rises the risk of any sort of trafficking. But of course, sex trafficking. Is this true? And assuming it is, how can those professional organizations help with that problem?
Yeah, so those debate on if that statement is technically true or not, because again, it's a hidden problem. But I do know the FBI tends to do a sting every year around the Super Bowl, and they do usually net some arrest, and they find sex trafficking victims during that sting. It is supply and demand economics, sadly. I hate to break it down like that. So you do have a large group of people coming in So it would be fair to assume that when you have a huge gathering of people who are sinful and lustful, that the demand for it would rise. So yeah, I do know that the NFL in the past has like done events to help highlight human trafficking, especially sex trafficking. And like they will have, I was reading today that they've had like stands that highlight various or anti-human trafficking organizations. They've hosted events. I don't know if the other ones do. I don't, because I follow the Super Bowl, I follow NFL more than I do these other events. So I kind of follow them more, what they do. But even if they aren't doing that, if you know an event's coming to your town and it might raise it up, I would suggest that make sure that hotel workers are informed on what to look for. There's several organizations that actually do go in and train hotel employees on how to look for and respond properly to possible sex trafficking situations in the hotel.
Man, I can only think about what the World Cup coming to Dallas. I think on the next round or a round after.
It's the next
Is
round.
the next round. I'm just like, oh, I hope our government and local agencies and just organizers are like, you know what? We're going to put so much money into fighting. I'm hopeful, but fighting human trafficking and doing what we can to minimize it
Yeah.
in this round
Well,
because
Walter, as a resident, you can start that ball rolling now.
that
Yeah.
is true. What should I do, Kelly? What can I do?
I mean, I, 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 as a former U.S. Senate employee, I kind of cringe saying this, but it's talking to your local, especially if you want to focus on Dallas. It's talking to your Congress or your city council person, your representative, making sure that they're aware that this is going to be an issue and that we need to start planning for it now, not when it's showing up.
Yeah, that's good. I will email them. Be like, look, guys. Can we ask what senator you used to work for?
Yeah, I used to work for U.S. Senator Maria Cantwell,
Oh, okay.
For which state?
Washington State.
Okay.
Oh, okay, cool. Right on. Nice. Okay, so speaking of local, what can local churches? Obviously, they could talk to the representatives and stuff. NGOs and governments do to help in any small, meaningful way. What are the small things that people can do?
So, like I said before, there's a list of vulnerabilities, and the list is huge on vulnerabilities. And it's looking how you can help fight those vulnerabilities. A lot of times with churches, especially, but NGOs as well, and people, they're like, oh, I want to go open an aftercare center, or, those broader things, which are great. And I'm not saying don't do that, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. I don't think people realize it's not, you can't just open your home to them. There's a lot of resources and training and government stuff that goes into that. But it's also, it may not be the need that your area has. And especially for churches, I'm going to recommend a book. It's called Ending Human Trafficking, a Handbook of Strategies for the Church Today. And it was written by Shane Moore, Dr. Sandra Morgan, and Kimberly McCohen Yim. Dr. Morgan is a member of FAAST. She is amazing, she is smart, and she is so dedicated to this issue. That book is a great resource for understanding how there are so many different ways that you can fight human trafficking without doing the big picture items. She tells a story.
I will put a link to that in our show notes. I just wanted to make
awesome.
sure listeners knew that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, she talks about how one church was looking at doing these big, huge, like thinking they should do this, survival focused thing. But when they actually looked at the neighborhood, what was going on in the neighborhood, what actually was most needed was an after school, like child computer lab. So kids had a place to come and be on computers and learn, and that was what the community really needed, and it had an amazing effect on the kids in the neighborhood and a positive, impact. And so it's things like that, looking at what your community needs. Does it need a food bank? Does it need, um, you, working with the homeless? What's going on in your community? And then if you want really, really small, tangible things, on our website, we have various resources, those Bible studies, those prayer guides. We'll have I'm finishing up our Advent guide. We'll have a Lent study guide, host a Freedom Sunday where you dedicate one Sunday of your church to focusing on human trafficking, learning what the Bible has to say about it, hearing stories, and taking up a donation to an organization.
Yeah, that's good. I was going to say Freedom Sundays. I feel like in the South typically revolve around 4th of July and troops and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of freedom, the movie Sound of Freedom seems to have brought back to the surface these issues. Would you recommend the movie if you've seen it? If you have seen it, what does it get right? What does it get wrong?
So I'm going to be honest. I have not seen Sound of Freedom.
Nor have I.
I honestly, I will admit I will probably watch it one day when I can be at home, comfy, and have my creature comforts around me. I know that it's going to be traumatic, and I just want to be cozy and mentally prepared for when I do watch it.
Right. Yeah.
I do know people who I work with, members of FAAST, and a few others that I've trust, who've gone to see it, and I can send you a link. Well, Haley Clark of World Hope International and Jason Pope of the Rain Collective, they did an hour-long talk of what they feel the movie gets right and wrong, and they do a really good job discussing all of those impacts. I will say, since the movie has come out, FAAST has gotten more people contacting us about what can we do, which is great. Trying to find out how they can not legitimately, but effectively and in an educational way fight this problem. And it's, increased donations, and donations are always good because it's part of how we survive.
Right. Yeah. So we can put that link, or if you share that link with us, we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
I think unless you want to, I'll give you the last word, Kelly, if you want to say anything, plug anything, tell us a little bit more about FAAST that maybe we didn't get a chance to talk about. I want to make sure you have the floor to say or explain anything that we didn't get to before we sign off.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just encourage people to learn the truth about human trafficking. I mean, there's so much out there, and it's hard to learn everything, but I encourage you to take a look at your life and just go, how can I make a small change to make a difference? It can be as simple as changing who you buy your coffee from, who you buy your clothes from, doing a little bit of research and going and shopping from, ethically sourced suppliers makes a difference. And then, like I said, anytime you fight a vulnerability, you are fighting human trafficking. And just fight those vulnerabilities the best way you know how.
One of the supporters for this podcast, Shenandoah Joe's Coffee, ethically sources their coffee.
Awesome.
My wife used to work for 10,000 Villages, which is a fantastic store that is a nonprofit but helps gives very small loans to startups in developing countries, for whether it be making beads or jewelries or their woodcutters. $1,000 in Nicaragua goes a long way, and then they partner directly with those local sellers, which is really great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, well, thank you so much. It was very informative, Kelly. And we'll make sure
Kelly,
to put
thank you.
links
Thank you
to
for
all the
having
stuff
me.
we talked about in the show notes. So
Thank
until
you.
next time. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks.
Our album art was done by my wife, and our theme music was composed by TJ Stokes.